Welcome to the Work Trends podcast from Talent Culture. I'm your host, Megan Mbiro. Every week, I interview interesting people who are reimagining work. And be sure to check out our Work Trends Twitter chat events calendar located at talentculture.com on the podcast page. Welcome, everyone, to the Talent Culture Work Trends podcast, sponsored today by Ivanti. Today's work trend is something that we have all experienced at one point during the pandemic, working remotely. If you look at your social media feeds, you will notice multiple surveys asking people what types of work arrangements they prefer. Obviously, COVID-19 has changed the way we view work and the workplace. With so many people now working remotely, we wanted to take a closer look at this way of working, specifically the benefits and the challenges of the everywhere workplace, so to speak. Our conversation is going to revolve around Ivanti's Everywhere Workplace Survey, which reveals some very interesting insights about the remote workforce, like the fact that more than half of employees report working more hours outside of the office since going remote. But despite working more, they're actually happier. We will dig into this insight further with our guest today. Melissa Pulse is the Senior Vice President and CMO at Ivanti and is responsible for their global marketing function. She brings decades of experience with a strong track record of fueling growth through customer-centric approaches and integrated marketing strategies for acquired companies. She was most recently Senior VP and CMO at Avid. Prior to this role, she held CMO and marketing leadership positions at Optanix, Progress, Iron Mountain, and Infor. So welcome to the show, Melissa.
Thank you, Megan. It's great to be here. And decades of experience makes me sound like I'm 107, but that's okay. We'll go with it.
Hey, listen, you and I are in the same boat, okay? We got this. You know, this topic is a very popular one and something I look forward to diving in more with you. So thanks again for being here. And I know the audience is excited, so I'm diving right in. Give us the overarching story about the recent Everywhere Workplace Survey.
Yeah, so we did what we're calling the Everywhere Workplace Story, and it was written using Ivanti expertise, independent third-party research, and global future of work experts and influencers in the industry to highlight the evolution that's taken place in the way people work and how the pandemic has shaped the way organizations need to think about their workforce. And we interviewed and surveyed over 6,000 individuals. It was a global survey from companies across US, UK, France, Germany, Spain, Netherlands, Belgium, Sweden, Australia, and so on. So it was really a global look at the impact that the pandemic has had on the future of work.
Well, and I have to say, I was absolutely honored to be in that group. It's good stuff. And I think, we're all still kind of feeling the effects of everything going on around us between, global wars. To me, and I know I've, talked to my audience about this, we kind of still feel like we're in the pandemic, no?
Yeah, I think we do. We're still in the midst of it. I think, it's our reality of the way people are working today and the way that they want to work today. This is here to stay. And the data from this report really proves that, regardless of if we're in the pandemic or we're several years out of it. I think, the future of work is now and it's here to stay.
Tell us more about the findings. Let's dig in a little deeper here. And I want to hear if you thought anything stood out as a surprise.
Yeah, it did. I think the enormity of the shift that's occurred was the most surprising. So the data shows that, like I said, the Everywhere Workplace is really here to stay. That's what we call it, right? The Everywhere Workplace, where people are really working from everywhere now. And really that the employees are in control of their workplace environment. So let me just give you a few of the stats, Megan, if that's okay. So the new landscape really, I believe, should have been what it was like all along. But, I think the pandemic has driven some very specific conclusions. So the data says that only 13% of employees would like to permanently return back to an office. And this was from the report we did around the Everywhere Workplace, but we did just do a survey with our own employees just over the last couple of weeks, and we found 1% 1% of Ivanti's employees say they want to go back to the office full time. And 71% of employees would choose to work from anywhere over being promoted. Now, that was a shocking stat to me. And by the way, no one should ever have to, in my opinion, have to make a trade-off for, promotion over working from anywhere. But when you ask them that question, they said, absolutely, I would forgo a promotion over to keep working in the environment that I choose to work in and have the flexibility. And 64% of employees said they would take a pay cut to be able to continue to work in the everywhere workplace. 42% said they prefer a hybrid model. And this was really cool, I thought, is 44% considered themselves digital nomads, which are, people that are hitting the road. I actually have become a little obsessed with some of those van videos, where people like redo these vans. I'm thinking maybe that's in my future. But so the digital nomads has certainly become a thing of reality as well. And the shift that's occurred, 87% of respondents saying, no, right, to full-time work in the office. Not going to do it. That's in our broader survey. And before the pandemic, that was a mere 5% of workers said the same thing. So it's just really an insane kind of shift. And whether we're in the midst of the, pandemic still, which I believe we are, or not, I think this is a reality that's here to stay.
Have the results of the survey played directly or indirectly into this whole phenomenon of the Great Resignation, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think, as I said, the employees are in control of their work environment, which I think is a really positive thing for us as a community globally. Americans, for example, quit jobs at a record pace, as we know, in the second half of 2021, and more plan to change jobs in 2022, according to the U.S. Labor Department. But our own survey, which was really interesting, reveals that 24% of respondents have left their jobs in the past year, and 27% are considering leaving. And what's happening is employers are really left scrambling, if you will, to retain and attract top talent. And the option of flexibility in the workforce has become an influential factor when employees are making a decision whether to stay with a company or not. So this is no longer about even just saying, hey, you can work from anywhere. It's about giving the employees the tools, the environment, and from a technology standpoint is being able to put them in making sure that their devices, no matter what they're using and where they're using it, that they're able to, be protected, especially in the situation where there's so many cybersecurity issues going on. They want to feel protected and be able to have a great employee experience. So it is absolutely making having a major impact.
I think we're very focused, and rightly so, on the positive points of the remote workplace, but there are some negative impacts of working remotely. Talk to us about some of those negative comments by the survey respondents.
Yeah, so, like you said, the remote work has improved employees' sentiments and increased productivity, but there were some concerns. We had some top concerns that we heard from our survey. So, the things probably this wasn't as surprising, but the 51% said the lack of interaction with their colleagues, right? Like in-person connections, which I think we all ache for, right? Is those moments where we can connect with one another again. And 28% said they're not able to collaborate and communicate as effectively. And there is this notion of noise and distractions as we see cats, come into videos, and the children coming out of the woodwork that, 27% said their noise and distraction were a big negative, if you will. But as you heard, none of them would give up the flexibility, in order to have those things back. Some people, 10% said negatively affected their mental health, right? The kind of the being able to really turn it off and have sort of those outlets that they can lean into, and work kind of tends to be all around you. So it did have an impact on their mental health as well. So there are definitely some negative aspects. And I think, again, it comes down to employers being sure that they're considering all the upsides and the advantages, but also the impact, the negative kind of concerns that people have around the everywhere workplace as well.
And I have to say the gender divide has been, and it continues to get, a point of contention in the workplace. How has the everywhere workplace impacted women in the workforce?
Well, this is one that frustrates frustrated me, to be honest with you. I'm a woman in business. I'm a second generation CMO. My mother was a CMO of a software company as I was growing up.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, very cool. A company called Kronos. It's here based in Boston area. So I learned at a very young age that women can do anything, and not just anything men can do, but like literally anything we set our minds to. So when I heard some of the data and read some of the data coming back, it didn't shock me, but it still sort of, frustrated me that, the bottom line is that women going through this whole experience, like everybody equally wanted the flexibility between men and women. But when it came down to like some of the areas of focus and concern for women over men, 67% of women were concerned about the lack of childcare and their ability to be able to support their children, where the majority of men were really focused on their career. Like, by not being in the office every day with people, am I going to miss opportunities from a career standpoint? So this gender divide kind of became a topic of discussion that we had, that there's details in the report around that men are more likely during the pandemic to be focused on continuing and progressing of their career, where women are still taking on a lot more of the responsibilities in the home, and their consideration for their environment comes down to a lot more than just their career opportunities. So, look, women are crushing it. We all know that. But, I think it's time to dismantle the sort of power structures and measure of success and start really building new pillars of success that are more inclusive and to the human experience versus the gender divide that we still see as evidence in this survey.
Yeah. And I just think it's lazy.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I just think, let's stop being lazy. I look out my window when I'm at my home office, and my neighborhood is filled with men and their kids, their babies walking around the block. So I'm seeing something that's a little bit different in my world here in the Pacific Northwest of that. But it's also just like we're hanging on to these stereotypes. And you're absolutely right. Time to knock it off. Time to get real with what's really happening.
The data is the data, right? And it points to the evidence that still exists. But I point out the way I was brought up. My dad was the mayor of the city I grew up in. They were both very busy people. But, my dad was, doing all the laundry and cooking all the meals and throwing the fried chicken on the counter. And my mother's running in her, pantsuit, picking me up last from gymnastics. So, look, and that was many years ago when women weren't necessarily around the boardroom. So, look, I think it's something we have to take seriously. I've seen the evolution and the change happen in my own career and experience. But the data shows that it's still there. It's still an issue we need to focus on as a community.
Yeah, we got to get real about it at the same time.
Totally. Got to get real about it. Yeah.
Let's talk about mentorship programs. I'm a huge fan. I've always been. But how does this relate to some of the initiatives that organizations can implement, especially when it comes to women?
Yeah. I love implementing mentorship programs. I think it's so critical to, for women and men, right? Especially when you're feeling like you heard some of the major concerns were about the disconnection and, the concern about career progression and so on. And I think mentorships really lend itself to that. But, look, I remember several years ago now, a woman that I was mentoring, and it lends right into the zone of sort of the way it was on the Everywhere Workplace versus where it is today. This young woman, she was having her first baby, and she said to me, she's like, you know what? This company isn't too psyched about people working from home. So I think I'm going to start looking for another job. And I said to her, are you good at what you do? And she's like, yeah, I'm freaking awesome. Like, I'm a rock star. It's like, okay, are you worth it to this company? And she said, I think I'm totally worth it. I said, okay, if you want to work here. And I asked her, do you like your job? Like, is this a place you actually want to be? And she's like, absolutely. This is where I want to be. I'm like, all right, then you go in there and say what you need in order to make this work for you. And she did. A couple days later, she got up the courage. She walked in there and she said, look, I need to work from home a couple days a week. And I'm not going to do the commute an hour every day into the city. And they said, okay.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you just have to ask, right?
Right. You just have to lean in and ask a little bit. And now she's in the finance organization at this company, still there, and has moved up to the ladder to, secondary in control of a CFO. So, it just goes to show you the power of a mentorship program, whether it's, women with women or however you want to apply it, but it can make a huge difference in the lives of people. So I very much encourage mentorship.
When I talk about generations, I can't can't help but talk about technology. So I'm going to lump them both into this question. How has either emerging generations in general meets technology, what's that impact been, right, on this new workforce reality for both tech workers and non-tech employees?
Yeah, so a couple things there. I'll hit this in a couple of angles. Like, first of all, the generation that's kind of coming up, right, that are in that sort of, 20 to 34 range, their mindset is very much of the notion of like owning their own destiny and not necessarily going to work for one company all the time. Like, the IBM days when people would work for IBM for 30 years or whatever it was. They want to work for lots of companies and they want the flexibility. So the whole notion of the hybrid workforce where you work for a company full time, but then you also tap into folks that are in that sort of next generation that maybe don't want to work for you full time, but want to be engaged with multiple companies, because we're going to miss out on a whole nother generation of workforce if we're not considering that. So the technologies that you deploy in that hybrid situation, needs to be obviously very safe. You got to know where all of your assets are, right? So you can manage and control them no matter where people are working for, whether they're working for you full time or whether you're in kind of a hybrid model where people work from many locations. So flexibility with tools, I think this, a lot of this talk comes down to flexibility and having the employees really dictate the kinds of tools and the environment they want to work in. But the number one most important thing across any of the generations is that they have the tools that they need to do their job and that they feel safe from a cybersecurity perspective, that those tools that they're using aren't going to create any kind of challenges for them from a security standpoint. And the experience, regardless of where either you're a full-time employee or you're in a hybrid role, that if you're having any issues from your experience with your technology, that it's solved like super quickly, and the experience to get those issues resolved are solved really fast, because you can't go up to the IT desk right now and say, hey, I got this problem with my laptop. Can you fix it, right? So just having the ability to be able to fix those issues quickly and have an amazing experience is a requirement now of employees.
Well, finally, time flies when we're having fun over here. It is crystal ball time. So,
oh boy, here we go.
So based on the survey responses and what you are seeing in the world of work, what do you forecast the workplace is going to look like in, say, 2030?
Oh my gosh, 2030. It's not too far away. My youngest will be graduating high school at that point. That's kind of crazy. But so look, it's kind of shocking that it's not that far away. But I think the trend of where employees work and the flexibility they need to be productive personally and professionally isn't temporary. I think by 2030, this will be more cemented as the norm. We are dealing with the great resignation now, but at the heart of it, people just want to have options and choices, and they're really in control of that now. So I think companies have to change their fundamental mindset and methodology on talent that includes not only the flexibility of the environment that they work in, but also the technologies that we use to enable that employee experience. So by 2030, or if not sooner, I think having technology that supports and secures all environments an employee wants to work in will no longer be a differentiating factor, right? Which it is today. Hey, employees, come work for us. We got this, you can work where you want. You got great technology to do it, blah, blah, blah. It will become table stakes. It's going to be the way that companies need to run in order to have a highly engaged workforce.
Melissa Pulse. I love your last name, by the way. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks so much. It was my pleasure, Megan.
Thanks for listening to the Work Trends Podcast, your favorite source for all that's new and exciting in the world of work. If you love what we do here, make sure to share our podcast with your friends, your colleagues, your family, you name it. And don't forget to tune in for our next episode. Catch up with you next time. Thanks to listening to Work Trends from Talent Culture. Join us every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern for a live Twitter chat with our podcast guest. To learn more about guests featured on today's show, visit the show notes for this episode at talentculture.com and help us spread the word. Subscribe to Work Trends wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave us a rating, review in iTunes. Share Work Trends with your coworkers, your friends. Look forward to it. See you next time.